Welcome to the Armwood Opinion Channel here on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about Jim Crow Part 2 and the father of the Jim Crow of the 21st century. Who is that father? Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. He is the Judge Taney of this era. Why do I call him the Judge Taney? Judge Taney was the Supreme Court judge who ruled in 1857 that Dred Scott had no rights and that black people had no rights in the United States. How is John Roberts the new Judge Taney? John Roberts ruled in 2012 that the pre-clearance provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which were passed by Congress in 1965 to implement the 15th Amendment of the Constitution and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which gave black Americans equal rights under the Constitution, and the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws, and the 15th Amendment, which gave us the right to vote. In the case of Shelby County, Alabama versus Attorney General Eric Holder, Judge Roberts, for the all-Republican appointed majority, wrote that those rights were subject to state power, arguing a states' rights doctrine, type doctrine, that's not even constitutional. So this is what we're talking about today. As a result of that, you have laws like the voter suppression law in Georgia, the voting rights law in Georgia, which is being challenged by the current Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and the fight around the country to stop these voter suppression bills, which are a reaction to the huge turnout of particularly black voters, but voters as a whole, who were voting in large part in reaction to the presidency of Donald Trump.
Today, the Department of Justice is suing the state of Georgia. Our complaint alleges that recent changes to Georgia's election laws were enacted with the purpose of denying or abridging the right of black Georgians to vote on account of their race or color in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Several studies show that Georgia experienced record voter turnout and participation rates in the 2020 election cycle. Approximately 2/3 of eligible voters in the state cast a ballot in the November election, just over the national average. This is cause for celebration. But then in March of 2021, Georgia's legislature passed SB 202. Many of that law's provisions make it harder for people to vote. The complaint alleges that the state enacted those restrictions with the purpose of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color. This lawsuit is the first of many steps we are taking to ensure that all eligible voters can cast a vote, that all lawful votes are counted, and that every voter has access to accurate information. We are seeing a dramatic increase in menacing and violent threats ranging from the highest administrators to volunteer poll workers. To address this effort to undermine our electoral process, today the Deputy Attorney General will issue a directive to all federal prosecutors and the FBI, which will highlight the prevalence of these threats and instruct them to prioritize investigating these threats.
So that's what we're talking about today. Now, why do I call John Roberts the father of the new Jim Crow? He claimed that the tradition, keyword tradition, of equal sovereignty of the states made this provision unconstitutional, though there is no such language in the Constitution. The language comes directly from the opinion of Judge Taney in the 1857 Dred Scott case, which once again that held that black slaves or free could never be citizens of the United States. Of course, constitutionally, that ruling was overturned by the 14th Amendment, which said that all people born in the United States were citizens of the United States and citizens of the state in which they resided. So this was an unconstitutional usurpation of the rights of black people by John Roberts. This evil that John Roberts articulated in the Shelby case has opened the door to Republicans once again passing legislation around the country restricting the vote. This legislation should be all ruled a violation of the Constitution and a violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
David, what has been the reaction there in Washington to the Supreme Court effectively hobbling the Voting Rights Act?
Well, it's been split along the same lines that the court was split on. I mean, one of the things that's really striking here is you have 5 justices all appointed by Republican presidents voting for the majority decision and 4 justices all appointed by Democratic presidents dissenting here. And you see that same kind of split out in Congress. You see Democrats very upset about this rule, and you see Republicans who have come out so far praising it, saying the Voting Rights Act has done its work. It may not be needed anymore.
Now, the court actually said Congress may, if they want to, come up with a more updated data-based formula for who actually is subjected to the Voting Rights Act, which jurisdictions are subjected to it. Of this Congress, that seems very unlikely. What's likely to be the ramifications, the effect for Americans where they vote going forward?
So you're right, Congress can make another law. What the Supreme Court struck down was the formula that determines which states must get pre-clearance for changing their voting laws. They didn't strike down the part that allows for the pre-clearance. But the reality is, it seems very unlikely, despite the fact that this was passed with an overwhelming majority in Congress, very unlikely that Congress is going to go back in now and make a new formula. Because essentially some Congress members would be voting to have their own states get special federal oversight, which is hard to imagine. And so what that will mean is it will be easier for the states that are covered, predominantly in the Southeast, but not exclusively, to change their voting laws without getting federal approval in advance.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David.
In a paper by Harvard law professor Blackshear, along with Lonnie Guinier, makes this very clear. It argues that Roberts' opinion in the Voting Rights Act case was directly derived from Dred Scott. Dred Scott case was the origin of the equal sovereignty argument. The argument that Judge Taney used to say that the sovereignty of slave states allowed them to decide whether they recognize black Americans as citizens. This, according to Law Professor Blackshear, the oldest and most demeaning official insult to African Americans in American constitutional history. So when you're hearing people saying that race has not been a determinant in lots of American history, there's a foolish boy-like senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, who Trump said his daddy was involved in the killing of President Kennedy, and who he bowed down and kissed the ring to, metaphorically, and has been a supporter of since. He claimed that, critical race theory was a Marxist theory that replaced race with economic determinism. He doesn't know anything about it. He's talking to uneducated people. Ted Cruz does not understand it because he's never done the reading. He's lazy. He's also the most despised person in the U.S. Senate by other senators because he's slimy. And all he cares about is grabbing power and self-aggrandizement, gaining things for himself. Really bad man. Really, really bad man. So, this is where we are today. So, the current Justice Department, under Merrick Garland, has sued the state of Georgia because the Republicans in Congress have blocked the enactment of House Bill 1 protecting voting rights and reinstating that pre-clearance clause because Republicans know that they will not be able to block black people and other people of color from voting in large numbers with that law in place. I mean, this is the law in the state of Georgia that's being attacked that says you can't give water to someone online waiting to vote. When people are online waiting 7 to 10 hours in the city of Atlanta because the state, Republican-controlled state administration, has not provided the resources, polling places, or staff to allow people to vote in a reasonable amount of time like they do in white areas. This is the new version of what happened to my grandfather when he was given the Constitution, and then after he read and explained that, Latin to read to keep him from vote. He lived during the old Jim Crow. Now we're in Jim Crow Part 2. It's not complicated. It's not hard to see. Anyone who denies it is sticking their head in the sand. They're the proverbial ostrich. And the ostrich has his derriere upturned, and you know where we need to stick our foot. I'll let that sink in. So, hopefully this lawsuit will gain traction, and also that we, the people of the United States, will raise our voices to our representatives. We'll raise our voices in the street. We will demonstrate, peaceably of course, but demonstrate. Hopefully there'll be a mass march sometime soon to the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., demanding that this case be ruled upon, and let the court know, let the nation know, that we are not going to stand for this. We are not going to stand for it. We're not going to sit for it. We're not going to kneel for it. We're not going to let it happen. This is an attack by the Republican Party on Black America, and we will resist. We will not stand there and take it. General Miley gave a response at the beginning of last week as to why it's important to understand white rage in the United States. That's a really good book, White Rage, that you should read. And why critical race theory, or like what I like to call critical race studies, is important for understanding what's going on. They don't want you to learn about Judge Taney's decision in 1857 and how John Roberts used language from that decision to rationalize his ruling, ignoring the 14th and 15th Amendment to the Constitutions. They don't want you to teach that. That's what they don't want you to teach when they say they don't want critical race theory taught. With that, I am going to end this video. I don't want to make it too long. If you have any questions, comments, reactions, and I hope you do, I'd like to get a discussion started in the comment section below. So please place your comments below, hit the like button, and remember, resistance is not futile. It's voltage divided by current. And as I like to say, if Locutus could resist the Borg in Star Trek, in the imaginary world of the 24th century, we can resist this racist Republican attack on Black America in the 21st. You have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Resistance is not futile.